the DA has recently put up posters and KZN, which says the ANC calls you racists, we call you heroes. And since then, they have removed those posters. What is your opinion of that? Do you believe that was doomed to fail from the start?
There is no question about it that the posters of the DA were going to cause controversy. Whoever designed them must have expected that they would generate a political storm. So in my view, I think it was intentional on the part of the DA to put up those posters. What is the situation in Phoenix? The situation is this. There were racial tensions between Indians and Africans, resulting in people being killed. And in the main, the majority of the people who were killed are Africans. So the ANC reacted and called Indians, inverted commas, racists, and the DA calls them heroes. Quite clearly, the DA has taken sides here. It sides with Indians and is dismissive of the Africans who have died. So in the context of local government elections, it is very clear that the DA in Phoenix decided that it does not want the votes of Africans, it wants the votes of Indians, which is why it designed the message that was on its posters the way it did, to say, Indians, vote for us, you are not racist. Africans are dismissive of you. That's my reading of the Phoenix situation. The summary of it is that the DA is insensitive to racial tensions in Phoenix, and you can extrapolate and say in South Africa as a whole.
But do you think this was planned from where it started to now, or do you think they only removed the posters because of the blowback?
Clearly, they removed the posters because of the blowback. They never imagined that it would catch the attention of the entire nation, and therefore painting a negative picture of the party nationally. They thought that the posters would be confined to Phoenix and they would be able to harvest the votes of Indians without the rest of South Africa realizing what is going on in that small corner of the country. And they were wrong. The posters became the center of national discourse. And quite clearly, the DA was embarrassed, which is why it had to remove them quickly.
And I recently watched an interview where ENCA did an interview with Tony Leon, who obviously is the former leader of the Democratic Alliance. And Tony Leon says that there's a double standard here. He says, for example, that the EFF has recently reaffirmed that all the Indians in Phoenix are racist. And Prince Buthelezi from the IFP has said that those who stood for the rule of law in Phoenix are heroes. So he says there's one standard for the Democratic Alliance and another standard for the other parties. Do you think that's true?
It's not true. And there's a political context here. Number one, we know that the EFF is a racist party. Racist in the main against whites and against Indians. They are clear about their racism against these two groups of South Africans. And they have been condemned for it. I personally have condemned the EFF publicly for its racism against Indians and against white South Africans. So it is not true that the EFF does not get condemned by South Africans when it utters racist statements. That's number one. Number two, the racism, the alleged racism of the DA is directed against Black people. And the reason why there is sensitivity on the part of Black people with regard to the racism of the DA is because of our history of apartheid. Remember that apartheid was actually a white regime against the majority in South Africa who happened to be Black. So whenever there is a statement from white quarters against Black people remember what happened to them, what the white regime of apartheid did to them. That's why Blacks are hypersensitive when it comes to racism from white quarters. But it is not true that South Africans are not as sensitive to the racism of the EFF as they are sensitive to the racism of the DA. The EFF has been dismissed. As I said, we all know that the EFF is actually a racist party against specifically whites and against specifically Indians.
And that's a very interesting perspective, Prince. And yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, there's a more emotional context when it comes to Black people, and thus the DA needs to be more sensitive. But on that note, Tony Leon has recently, or a few months back, has also said that Mmusi Maimane was an experiment gone wrong. What is your opinion of that? Is that also a very insensitive, almost racist thing to say?
It's an honest thing to say. Tony Leon is being honest. And by the way, I like human beings who are honest, because even myself, I'm honest. So what is the honesty of Tony Leon? Here is what Tony Leon was saying. We know that the DA was formed by white South Africans. Anybody who thinks that I am lying must go back and watch the recordings of the first meeting between the New National Party, the DP, and there was a federal component to it. You will be very lucky to see a Black person in that room. So the DA was formed by white South Africans. So at some point, those who formed the DA, that is white South Africans, and Tony Leon was in that room, by the way, they decided that they are going to experiment with the small opening of the space in the DA to allow a few Blacks to come into the leadership structures of the party. Mmusi Maimane was the first biggest experiment by those whites. They said, let's try and hand over the party to a young Black chap and see how it will go, and see if it will work as a bait to attract Black voters. In the main, it did not work. And the rank and file of the DA, who happened to be white, these began to be anxious about their party being in the hands of a Black leader. So what did those who formed the DA do? They decided to take back their party, kicked out Mmusi Maimane, Herman Mashele, and the few who were in the leadership ranks of the party. So Tony Leon is right to say it was an experiment gone wrong. He was part of the experiment, by the way, Tony Leon. So he's being honest. We shouldn't condemn him for being honest.
But just to add to that, I think Tony Leon would say that Mmusi Maimane never believed in the core principles of the DA. That's why he says it's an experiment gone wrong, because they found a leader that never really believed in the principles of the DA. Is that an accurate criticism?
Well, if Tony Leon were to say that, I would say he is completely disingenuous and wrong, because he would have to tell us what are those core principles of the DA that Mmusi Maimane did not believe in. I understand, by the way, the principles of the DA, or let me put it this way, the purported principles of the DA. In the main, DA markets itself it's actually incorrect. The DA is not a liberal party, in my view. The DA is actually a nationalist party. Let me explain to you what do I mean by that. The DA has housed within itself, in the main, two nationalisms: Afrikaner nationalism. So the Afrikaners who used to belong to the old national party are there in the DA as we speak today, and they have not forgotten that they are an Afrikaner nation. Anybody who thinks that they have forgotten that an Afrikaner nation must go and study Afrikaners who vote for the DA. You will find that they still maintain their cultural organizations. The Broederbond, by the way, is still there. Cultural formations of the Afrikaners are still there. They are still very sentimental about defending their own Afrikaner culture and their own Afrikaner language. So anybody who's going to tell me the DA is a liberal party must tell me, why are these Afrikaners who are nationalists still in the DA? That's the first component of nationalism. The second component of nationalism that is in the DA that Tony Leon is not telling South Africans about is English/Jewish nationalism. Tony Leon, by the way, belongs to the Jewish component of nationalism. The Jews in South Africa have not forgotten that they actually constitute a nation. Go and study them. You will find that they continue to maintain their organizations that maintain their Jewishness. And that applies to the English, by the way. The English have preached liberalism in South Africa, at the same time praying for God to save the Queen. They have never forgotten that they constitute an English nation. So this whole thing that the DA is a liberal party, it's actually a subterfuge by those who run the party. They want to fool others. So Maimane has never contravened any DA principle. The only thing that happened to him is that he happens to be black. And as a black man, he belongs to a black nation, just like an Afrikaner individual belongs to an Afrikaner nation, just like a Jewish individual belongs to a Jewish nation. This idea that we're going to dissolve South Africa into some kind of a melting pot, it's not going to work. In any case, by the way, even our constitution doesn't promote that idea. It says we are a united nation. We are a nation united in diversity. So we don't dissolve Jews. We don't dissolve Afrikaners. We don't dissolve Zulus. We are simply united in our diversity, which is why we have a Heritage Day in September.
That's a fascinating perspective.